The photograph landed on his desk on a Wednesday night, and Kai Seo didn't move for 3 minutes straight. The men around him kept talking. Perimeter reports, rival movements, the careful arithmetic of a world held together by silence and intimidation. Kai had absorbed 1,000 briefings without blinking. He could run the numbers in his sleep. But for 3 minutes, none of it reached him. The photograph was incidental, pulled from routine street surveillance near Itaewon. A woman, caught mid-motion on a rain-slick street, completely unaware she was being watched. She was looking up at a building across the road, head tilted, one hand shielding her eyes from the glare of a street lamp. Not posed, not performing, just a person genuinely interested in something. In the way only people who are actually alive are interested in things. The city dissolved behind her into wet light and shadow. She looked like someone who had wandered out of a quieter, softer world and hadn't noticed yet that this one was different. Kai placed the photograph down on the desk slowly, the way you place something down when you're afraid of what you'll do if you keep holding it. Who is she? The room stopped. His head of security cleared his throat once. She's a journalist, sir. British. She was in the Itaewon corridor during the confrontation Tuesday night. Her camera may have captured. I didn't ask what her camera captured. Silence, clean and absolute. I asked who she is. Not one man in that room had heard Kaio ask about a person that way. Not in 7 years. They didn't look at each other for long, just the briefest exchange of eyes that said everything a word would have ruined. Find out everything, Kai said. His voice was the same as always. Low, final, completely without drama. And bring her to me. He said it like he said everything that mattered, like a door closing on a decision already made. But beneath the desk, out of sight of every person in that room, his hand had pressed flat against his thigh, steadying something. Just for a second. Just once. He was 36 years old. He had run the most dangerous organization in Seoul since he was 22. 14 years of building an empire that answered only to him. 14 years of wanting nothing that couldn't be calculated or controlled. Until right now. And he didn't even know her name. If you're new here, welcome. You found us at the right moment. And if you've been here before, you already know we don't do simple stories on this channel. Stay until the end, because I promise you this one gets into your chest and stays there. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because what's about to unfold in the next 20 minutes is exactly the kind of story you'll want to come back and find again. Nadia Osei arrived in Seoul on a Tuesday morning with one checked bag, a carry-on that was 70% camera equipment, and a sadness she had organized into something that looked almost like focus. Her mother had passed 6 months earlier. Grace Osei, a woman who read 2 books a week, laughed too loudly at her own jokes, and had carried a secret her entire life without ever once letting it slip. Nadia had grown up watching her mother hold something back, something careful and unexplained living just behind her eyes, and had told herself repeatedly that she'd ask about it someday. Someday never came. So she did what she always did when grief got louder than she could manage. She took an assignment. She moved. She put a lens between herself and the thing she didn't know how to feel yet. Seoul was supposed to be a month. A long-form feature for a culture magazine. A project with a clear shape and a clear end date. Clean. No complications. The night before she flew out, she sat cross-legged on the floor of her mother's bedroom, working through the last boxes, rationing each item the way you ration the final pages of a book you aren't ready to finish. She found a photograph tucked inside a folded scarf. Her mother, younger by decades, standing somewhere in Seoul, the Han River visible in the distance, beside a Korean man Nadia had never seen in her life. They weren't touching. They were just standing near each other. But the way they were standing said everything. The ease of it. The private comfort of 2 people who had chosen to be near each other. She turned the photograph over. One word on the back, in her mother's handwriting. A name. Nothing else. She stared at it for a long time, then tucked it into the front pocket of her carry-on, and told herself she'd figure out what it meant once she got there. Her oldest friend, Simone, called while the airport taxi was still merging onto the motorway. "You're doing the thing again," Simone said, before Nadia could even speak. "I'm working." "You're running. Dressed up as working." "There's a meaningful difference." "Imaging." Simone's voice carried 9 years of unimpressed friendship in a single sound. Just don't disappear into it, okay? Call me when you land. I'll be fine. She had absolutely no idea. Seoul hit her the way cities only hit you when you arrive already open to something. She came out of the station in Hongdae and stood on the pavement for a full 30 seconds with her bag still on her shoulder, just breathing it in. The noise, the neon, the particular energy of a place that moved on its own schedule and didn't apologize for any of it. That first night she wandered. She always wandered on first nights in new cities. The light in Itaewon near midnight was extraordinary, amber and broken, pouring out of a pojangmaka onto wet stone. And Nadia followed it without thinking. The way she followed anything worth photographing, instinct first, sense second. She heard the tension before she understood what she was walking into. 2 groups of men on opposite sides of a narrow street. Not moving. Not speaking. That particular stillness that isn't peace at all. It's the held breath before something breaks. She pressed herself into a doorway and stayed completely still. Heart steady in the practiced way of someone who had pointed a camera at difficult things before. Then silence. Total. A car pulled up. Black, unmarked. The door opened and a man stepped out. He wasn't built differently from the others. He wasn't louder or larger or better dressed. He simply stepped onto the street and stood there. And the entire atmosphere of that corner rearranged itself around him like weather. He said something. For words, quiet in Korean. And every man on both sides of that street walked away. Not reluctantly. Not slowly. They just left, like the decision had already been made, and the words were just the formality. Nadia had covered 3 conflict zones. She had photographed heads of state and warlords and men who wore their danger like a uniform. She had never in her life seen anything like that. The man turned. Kaio looked at Nadia Ose for the first time in person, and felt the surveillance photograph on his desk collapse into complete inadequacy. She still had her camera raised halfway, frozen somewhere between intention and forgetting. His eyes moved from the lens to her face. Something moved through his expression. Not surprise, something slower than surprise. The careful stillness of a man encountering something he had no framework for, and deciding in real time to keep that invisible. That's a dangerous thing to point at strangers, he said quietly. He got back in the car. The door closed. The street was empty. Nadia stood there for a long moment, then lowered the camera and looked at the screen. She had taken a photograph without meaning to. Him half-turned, the amber light catching the edge of his jaw. His expression open in the way faces are only open when they don't know anyone is looking. Something in it that wasn't authority or command or calculation. Something older than all of that. Something that looked, just barely, like want. She looked at it for a long time. She did not delete it. Drop a comment right now. Are you Team Nadia or Team Kai? Tell me, because this story is about to get so much more layered, and I want to know where you're standing before it does. She saw him again the next morning, because of course she did. The cultural gala she'd been assigned to cover. An enormous room full of important people in expensive clothes, all of them performing a curated version of themselves for the benefit of everyone else in the room. Nadia moved through it the way she always moved through events like this, invisible behind her lens, cataloging everything, belonging to no one. Until she wasn't invisible. Kaio stood near the center of the room the way a center stands, not moving toward attention, simply existing in a way that made attention irrelevant. He was in conversation, composed, unhurried, and across a room full of people vying for exactly what he already had. His eyes found hers like she was the only still thing in a room full of movement. She didn't look away. He didn't either. First time in Seoul. She turned. A young man at her shoulder. Open face, easy smile, the kind of warmth that took up space without asking permission for it. Is it that obvious? Only because you're looking at my brother like he's a question you're trying to work out, he said cheerfully. Most people look at him like he's a sentence they've already been handed. What's the difference? Questions, he said. You actually want the answer to. Seojuno. The younger brother. The one the machine hadn't fully finished with yet. Nadia noted the resemblance and filed it under. Familiar, unverified, handle with care. She smiled politely, turned her lens to the other side of the room, and said nothing else. She wasn't here to make connections. She especially wasn't here to make connections with the family of a man who had just made an entire street choose to leave by saying 4 words. That evening, she counted 2 cars behind her taxi the entire ride back to her hotel. One peeled away at a junction. The other followed until 1 block before her building, then disappeared. She watched it in the side mirror the whole time, keeping her breathing even. Panic, she'd learned, was only worth spending if it bought you an exit. She noted the model, the plates, the precise distance it kept, and filed all of it before she'd even unlocked her room door. She pushed a chair under the handle, which felt both reasonable and faintly absurd, sat on the edge of the bed and called Simone. "Okay," she said the moment Simone picked up. "Don't alarm yourself." "Nadia." "I am completely fine. I just need to think out loud for 60 seconds. What happened? I may have accidentally photographed some people in a situation I wasn't supposed to be in. The silence from London was heavy, and someone may be following me. Come home. I can't book a flight tonight, that's... Nadia, I am not having a discussion with you about this. Come home." She looked at the chair against the door, looked at the city burning through the gap in the curtains. "Let me understand what I'm dealing with first," she said. "I'll call you tomorrow. I promise." She did not sleep. She lay in the dark and ran through every photograph she'd taken, every street, every face, every moment she'd been somewhere her professional instincts said she probably shouldn't have been. She was a journalist. She told stories with images. She observed. She documented. She did not get pulled into things. That had always been the arrangement. Her phone rang at 6:40 the next morning. A known number. She let it ring twice, watched the screen, then answered. "Miss Osei." The apartment was the kind of space that made you understand immediately how power actually lived. Not loud. Not decorated for performance. Just precise. Expansive windows, clean lines, and soul spread out below in every direction like the city had been arranged for exactly this vantage point. No one met her at the door except a quiet member of staff who showed her to a room, listed the basics without elaborating, and left without being asked to. The apartment felt like a coat that belonged to someone else. Warm in all the right places. Completely wrong-shaped. She stood at the window for a long time with her bag still on her shoulder, then called Simone and explained what she understood, which was not much, and listened to Simone tell her to come home for 8 uninterrupted minutes. She convinced her, barely, that she was okay. She wasn't entirely sure that was true. She wanted it to be. The first morning, she came out early and found the kitchen. Hunger and anxiety together made her restless in a way that needed something practical to hold on to. She was measuring out coffee when she heard movement and looked up. Kai was already at the far counter, dressed, phone in hand, reading. He looked up. "Good morning," she said, careful. He nodded, returned to his screen. The kitchen was large enough that distance was possible, small enough that the silence had a shape. "How long am I here?" she asked. "Until the situation is resolved." "What does resolved look like, specifically?" "Days. Longer." "It means when it's safe." "That's not actually an answer." "It's the only honest one I have." She turned back to the coffee, made 2 cups, because she'd watched the staff bring his the previous evening, and she paid attention to things. She placed one near him without comment. He looked at the cup, looked at her. Something crossed his expression that was quiet and unreadable, and entirely unperformed. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." She took her cup to the far end of the counter, and made herself look at her phone. He finished his coffee, left without another word. She sat alone and told herself that was fine. It was fine. She spent that day on the rooftop. Soul from above was a completely different grammar. The streets she'd been lost in organized themselves into something readable. The noise simplified into pattern. Everything that had felt overwhelming at ground level became, from up here, almost tender. She shot for 4 hours and felt, for the first time since landing, fully like herself. When she came back inside, there was a meal on the kitchen counter. Covered, still warm, no note. She stood looking at it for a moment. Then she sat down and ate and said nothing about it. Neither did he. That was how those first days moved. Small gestures, unremarked on, adding up to something neither of them named. She made coffee, Food appeared. She left the terrace door unlocked in the mornings in case the light was useful to anyone else. Her equipment from the hotel arrived neatly organized near her door one afternoon without her having asked. She thanked him for that one directly. He nodded, went back to whatever document had his attention. She tried once to have a real conversation. Found him in the living room one evening, sat at a reasonable distance, asked something genuine about a neighborhood she'd been photographing from the roof, something with a real answer. He responded. Accurate, brief, complete. Returned to his work. She understood then that the distance he kept wasn't about her, specifically. It was structural. Something built into him across such a long time that it had stopped being a wall and started being load-bearing. You didn't dismantle load-bearing things by asking nicely. She stopped trying to force it. The quiet gestures were something. For now they were enough. The knock came on her fourth evening, while she was editing and trying not to think too hard about anything. She opened the door to Seojun holding a bag from somewhere that smelled extraordinary, wearing the expression of someone who had already decided this was going to go well. I brought food, he said. I don't know you, she said. I'm Seoyun. Kai's brother. The one people are less afraid of. That's a very low bar. He laughed. Not the performed laugh of someone working to be liked. A real one. Fair, he said. Can I come in any way? She looked at him. He was transparent in a way that was almost disarming. Everything he felt was right on the surface of him, visible, not because he was careless but because he simply didn't see the point of hiding things. She was still cautious. He was still a stranger. He was still connected to a man she didn't fully understand yet. But she was lonely. And the food was genuinely incredible. You can leave the bag, she said. He came in, sat down, stayed 2 hours. He talked about the city, a neighborhood market she hadn't found yet, a bookshop in Insadong run by a man who remembered every customer's taste better than they did themselves. He didn't explain his brother, didn't reference the situation, didn't try to soften anything or justify anything. He just existed in the room like a person and let her do the same. She kept her walls up, answered carefully, kept her distance. When he finally left, she felt lighter than she had in days and couldn't decide if that was a good sign or a warning. She settled on, cautiously good. He came back. She'd expected him to. There was something about Seojun that was persistent without being pushy, the certainty of someone who has already decided on an outcome, and is simply waiting patiently for the other person to get there. She let him in again. And again. The wall came down in the way walls actually come down, not dramatically, not all at once, one brick at a time across visits that each took something small from her without asking. She talked to him like a real person, laughed at things, let herself enjoy it. She trusted him slowly and properly, the way trust should be earned, not handed over. Why does he never explain anything? She asked one evening, when she finally felt like she could. Seojun was quiet for a moment. She appreciated that he didn't rush to fill the space. He learned when he was young, Seojun said, that giving information away was the same as giving power away. He never unlearned it. That sounds like an exhausting way to live. It is, Seojun said. Simply. Without apology or defense. For him most of all. She believed him. Completely, for the first time. It was Seojun who got her out of the apartment. Carefully at first. She stayed close, kept her phone in her hand, noted exits the way she'd started noting everything. But Seoul has a way of drawing you deeper than you plan. Especially when you're being shown it by someone who loves it genuinely. Gwangjang Market in the late afternoon, the vendors and the chaos and the food that had been perfected across decades of repetition. A record shop in Mapo where the owner knew Seojun's taste well enough to have pulled things before he arrived. A rooftop in Yeonam-dong where you could see 4 neighborhoods from a single chair, and the coffee was worth the stairs. She photographed everything. She lost herself in the work, the real work, the kind that felt like remembering who you were before anything difficult happened. She was laughing at something Seojun had said, camera still raised, when she felt the change in him. Small. Nearly invisible. She lowered the lens. He was watching a point across the street. She followed his gaze. Kai stood on the pavement opposite. Alone. watching her in the way you watch something you didn't expect to see and have no immediate response to. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cold. He was just looking at her, the way he looked at her across the gala that first morning, like she was something he was still in the middle of figuring out. Their eyes met. He held it for a moment. Then he looked at his brother, nodded once, and walked away. He came to check I was safe, Seo-jun said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She didn't say anything. But she watched the direction Kai had gone for a long time after. She found the photograph by accident on a Thursday afternoon. She'd been given access to a small archive room connected to the main office, a space full of old files, framed images, and the accumulated history of a family that had not always been what it currently was. She was looking for an outlet for her charger. She found instead, in a plain frame on the lowest shelf, a photograph. Seoul skyline in the background, the Han River just visible. Her mother, younger than Nadia had ever seen her, laughing in a way that her face rarely showed in photographs, standing beside a man who was unmistakably Kai's father. Both of them entirely at ease with each other. The particular ease of two people who have chosen, freely, to be in the same place. Nadia sat down on the floor of that archive room with the framed photograph in her hands, and did not move for a very long time. She heard him before she saw him. Kai in the doorway, taking in the photograph in her hands, and then her face, and understanding something without being told. "Sit down," she said. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. "Please." He sat. She showed him the photograph. He looked at it for a long time. "My father," he said. "I know," she said. "Your mother?" "Yes." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people standing at the edge of something large, and taking a moment before looking down. "How long?" she asked. He set the photograph down gently. "I don't know the full story," he said, "but long enough that the photograph ended up here." He paused. "Long enough that I don't think it was simple." She looked at the photograph again. Her mother's face. The lightness in it. The particular unburdened quality of someone who hasn't yet had to choose. She never said anything. Nadia said, "Not to him, not to anyone really." "Neither did he," Kai said quietly. She looked up. Something in the way he said it told her he understood what it meant to inherit silence from a parent. To grow up knowing there was a room in someone you loved that would never open for you. She didn't ask him anything else that evening. She didn't need to. Some things you understand without the words being said. He found her on the rooftop that night. She hadn't expected him, but she wasn't surprised. She was standing at the railing with her camera down at her side, just looking at the city, letting Seoul be enormous and bright and indifferent in the way that cities are when you need something to be larger than your own feelings. He came to stand beside her. Not close. Just present. They stood without speaking for a while. Seoul poured itself out below them in light and noise and the particular organized chaos of a city that had survived everything it had ever been given. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You don't owe me anything. I mean about why I had you brought here." She waited. "The Hangang Collective was a genuine threat," he said. "Everything I told you was accurate." "I know. But it wasn't only that." The admission cost him something. She could tell. Not from his face, which gave away very little. From the silence before it. The way he assembled the words with unusual care. "I saw the surveillance photograph before I knew who you were or what your camera had captured," he said. "And I couldn't explain the decision I made in the 4 minutes after that." She turned to look at him. He was still facing the city, jaw set, the whole architecture of him held at its usual careful tension, except something at the edges. Something that wasn't quite holding. "You could have just said that," she said. "I don't say things I can't back with certainty." And now, he turned, looked at her directly, the way he looked at her across a room full of people, like she was the only still point in it. "Now I'm certain of very little," he said. "But I'm saying it anyway." She held his gaze. The city continued below them, completely unbothered. She told him about her mother then. Not all of it. Enough. The silence her mother had carried. The photograph tucked inside a scarf. The name on the back in her mother's handwriting. He listened the way he did everything, without interruption, without hurry. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My father kept a box. I never opened it. It's in the archive." She looked at him. "There might be letters," he said. "I don't know. I never looked." "Why not?" "Because some things," he said slowly, "you don't look at until you're ready for what you'll find." She understood that. She had understood it since the night she found the photograph tucked inside the scarf and put it in her bag, and didn't look at it again until she had to. "Are you ready now?" she asked. He considered the question with unusual seriousness. "I think I might be," he said. They didn't go to the archive that night. But something settled between them that hadn't been settled before. A kind of quiet agreement that the past their parents had carried was real, and they were going to look at it, and they were going to do it together. She lowered her camera. She'd been holding it the whole time, the whole conversation, old habit, a shield she carried so naturally she sometimes forgot it was there. She set it down on the railing between them. He looked at it, then looked at her. "You never put that down," he said. "I know," she said. He reached over slowly. She expected him to move it. Instead he picked it up with both hands, the careful, deliberate way of someone who understood what they were touching, turned it over once, and then raised it and pointed it at her. She went completely still. She was never the subject. That was the oldest rule she had. The one she'd built so long ago it had stopped being a choice and become a fact about herself. The one behind the lens didn't appear in the story. She told the story. She was not in it. She didn't step back. She didn't say stop. She stood on the rooftop in the Seoul night with the whole city burning below her, and let him look at her, actually look at her, with nothing between her and being seen. The shutter clicked. Just once. He lowered the camera and looked at the screen for a long time. Something moved across his face. Unguarded, unmanaged, the kind of expression that belongs to a person and not to the role they perform. He turned the screen toward her. She looked at herself. She had photographed enough people to know immediately, in the fraction of a second it took, when a photograph had caught something true, when the person in the frame was genuinely present, and not a version of themselves assembled for someone else's benefit. She saw it now in her own face. The woman on that screen was not composed. She was not managing anything. She was not holding anything at a careful distance with both hands. She was standing on a rooftop in Seoul looking at a man who had just done something no one had ever done before. Chosen to look at her. And her face showed every single thing she felt about that. She looked like someone who had just arrived somewhere, and didn't know until this moment that they had been trying to get here. She looked like someone who had been in motion for so long they had forgotten what it felt like to stop. Her throat tightened. She looked up from the screen. He was watching her. Not the city. Not the photograph. Her. "That person," he said quietly, "is real." Her own words. She had said them to him in the archive, about the photograph of his father. He had held them and returned them to her precisely, in the language she understood better than any other. Not a declaration. Not a performance. Just the truth placed down simply by a man who had spent his entire life treating truth as a thing too expensive to give away. Choosing for once to set it where someone else could reach it. Something moved through her chest, wide and unhurried and completely irreversible. "My assignment ends Friday," she said. Her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. "I know." He didn't look away. "I called my editor," she said. "There's more to document here." Something moved across his face. Quiet, real, the rarest thing she had seen on him. Not quite a smile. Something more earned than that. Something that had been waiting a long time to have somewhere to go. "The city," he said. "The city," she confirmed. "Among other things." He reached out then slowly, giving her every moment to decide, and took her hand. Not with the weight of a grand gesture. Not with anything performed. Just his hand around hers, quiet and certain. The way he did everything that actually mattered to him. Like a decision already arrived at, simply being acknowledged out loud. She looked at their hands. Looked back at him. "I'm not running," she said. "I know," he said. And for the first time in his voice, she heard something that had nothing to do with the empire or the name or what 14 years of this life had cost him. Just him. Just this. Seoul blazed below them, gold and vast and completely indifferent. The way cities are when two people above them have just quietly decided to change everything. She took the camera back gently, looked at the photograph of herself one more time. Then she turned the lens toward him, the same angle as that first unintentional photograph from the Itiwan street, the one she had never deleted, the one that started all of it. He saw what she was doing. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't look away. He let her. The shutter clicked. She looked at the screen. Him, present and unguarded, no performance, no empire requiring anything from him in this exact second. Just a man who had ordered a stranger brought to him on the strength of a surveillance photograph, and had never once since been able to explain what happened when she arrived. She lowered the camera and looked at him. That person exists too, she said softly. He looked at her for a long moment. The city behind them, the night around them, everything that had led here. Her mother and his father and a photograph tucked inside a scarf, and a name written on the back in handwriting she would recognize anywhere. A street in Itiwan and a gala and a rooftop archive, and a hand held quietly above a city that had carried all of this across 30 years without ever once letting on. I know, he said. I'm still learning how to let him show. She held his gaze. He held hers. And that was it. That was all of it. Two people on a rooftop with everything still uncertain and nothing guaranteed, and all the complications of their family's past still waiting in a box in an archive room downstairs, choosing each other anyway. Not dramatically. Not with anything that required an audience. With a photograph and a returned word and a hand held in the dark above a city that had brought them here from opposite sides of the world, and had never once apologized for how it did it. And sometimes, in a life full of things you didn't get to choose, that is everything. If this story did something to you, hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing and it tells this channel everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we tell stories like this every single week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment and tell me the exact moment it got you, because I already know which one it was. She came to Seoul to document a city. She stayed for something no lens could ever hold.